Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mountain Forums. My name is Jacob Trussell, one of the content marketing leads here at Mountain, and I'm going to be your moderator for today. In today's forum, Breaking Barriers, Producing CTV Ads Has Never Been Easier, our speakers will be taking a deep dive into the evolution of CTV as a performance marketing channel, how to produce cost-effective video content, best practices for creative CTV ads that work, and real-life examples from brands that added CTV to their marketing strategy. Now I'd like to introduce today's speakers, Madeline Curto, Director of Agency Partnerships at Mountain, and Tony Wilson, VP of Revenue at C Squared Social. Madeline, Tony, take a second and tell the folks at home a little bit about yourself.
Hi guys, I'm Madeline. I'm the Director of Agency Partnerships here at Mountain. I've worked at Mountain for 2 years and QuickFrame for a couple of years before that, really giving me a lens into creative and how it relates to media.
Thank you, Madeline. Hey, everybody. I'm Tony Wilson, Head of Revenue for C Squared. Thank you, everybody, for taking time out of what I'm sure is a busy Tuesday to learn more about the power of connected television. Been
Awesome.
in marketing for 2 decades now at a couple of different agencies. And yeah, really excited to dig in and happy everybody's here.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. Thanks for introducing yourselves. Now, before we begin, I just wanted to remind everyone that we will have time for a Q&A at the end of today's session. So if you have a question for our speakers, feel free to drop that into the Q&A chat you should see on your screen. Without further ado, Madeline, Tony, take it away.
Well, I'm happy to start. Really to chat through how CTV has evolved over the past few years. Really with the rise of streaming platforms fundamentally changing the advertising landscape, more eyeballs are on TVs, meaning that more brands want their advertising dollars there. This has totally changed the advertising landscape in the last few years, making CTV a real tentpole moment of brands' media mixes. You'll see here on the slide a couple impressive stats showcasing how much the space has grown, but the first and last bullet really stand out to me. Streaming services have captured a record-breaking 38.8% of total TV usage this past May, and more adults are using CTV than Meta. About 72% of adults are on CTV compared to 68% on Meta. With platforms like Mountain, brands now have this unique opportunity to reach highly engaged audiences in a premium, trackable environment.
Yeah, thank you, Madeline. I mean, slide as always, people always ask, why should CTV be in anybody's media mix, right? And the question I always kind of push back at them is, well, why should it not be, right? It's just so powerful. I mean, first of all, the right question that I mentioned is, why shouldn't it be? There's just so many benefits. It combines the best of both worlds. You get the credibility of television, right? Reaching people on that big screen in the living room, which drives trust and credibility. But also with CTV, you get the precision and measurability of digital marketing. So I'm sure many of you are used to digital marketing. Some of you may already be utilizing CTV, but you can really pinpoint your audience just like you would on paid social or just like you would on paid search. But with the added benefit of that additional credibility that TV kind of big screen living room impact brings to the conversation. The other thing that's really cool is we kind of call it a halo effect of CTV. So when you add CTV into your strategy and into your mix, it doesn't just drive results in silo just for that CTV buy, which it does exceptionally well. And a lot of our clients, it is their best performing return on ad spend or CPA or whichever KPI they measure on a weekly basis. But it also makes everything else perform better too. Your paid search campaigns will perform better. Social media efforts will perform better. Even the email campaigns that we're putting out there are performing better once we added CTV into the mix. And then all of them benefit from the additional brand awareness and, again, that credibility that comes from being on TV. And certainly the best part being, very analytical, came from a performance marketing background where you track every single dollar, right? It's really trackable, right? You can analyze exactly how your campaigns are performing in real time. You can easily adjust them based on whatever that analysis is and what your objectives are, and then optimize to maximize your return on that investment. So again, the question isn't really why should CTV be in your media mix? It is why is it not in your media mix yet, right? Because it probably should be for the right types of campaigns, the right types of clients, and the right types of categories. All right, so I think we do need to, on the next slide, clear up a major misconception about connected television. Now, most clients that I speak to think that creating ads for connected TV is this big, expensive, long drawn out, timely proposition. And the fact actually couldn't be further from the truth. Creating and launching on CTV doesn't require a huge budget or take forever to produce. In fact, here at C Squared Social, we produce about 40 CTV spots a year currently. And depending on the concept, sometimes we can get, creative that works, is performance driven and ready to launch in as little as 2 weeks, which is kind of crazy when you think about it, right? Because when I began my career in performance television back in, was it 2005, the general timeline for a TV spot at that point was about 13 weeks. So there's certain elements about how do we do it so it's fast, effective, and performance driven. And it all starts with asking these, the right questions, right? So one of those right questions is, who are you trying to reach? Just like with digital, you can get super specific with your targeting, right? So we can target by demographics, psychographics, zip code level targeting. So you can really hone in on that audience that is going to convert within that level of the funnel. How do you solve the problems, right? Because we have to solve a problem if we're giving somebody a message in order for them to then act. So your messaging really needs to address the problem for that specific demo, hit the problem directly in the face, and then address your audience's needs, right, by solving that problem. Emotion is huge, right? So you should always be trying to evoke some level of emotion. So we're emotional beings, right? As human beings, we are emotional by nature. So emotions drive action, and CTV is the perfect medium to have that engaged impression, again, on the big screen in the living room, to really make that emotional connection that will then drive eventual action. And where in the funnel are you reaching them, right? What is your objective for this channel? Some people use upper, some middle, fewer lower, but it can live in many different parts of the funnel. So are you building awareness? Are you driving conversions? And your creative really needs to align with the customer's specific place within that journey. So by answering these questions, we create CTV ads that really resonate with audiences and drive action. And thanks to Mountain's platform, it's easier than ever to produce high quality, effective CTV ads, kind of without that traditional barriers that come along with, big agencies, big productions and whatnot, and really put the money into media.
And getting started doesn't have to be that difficult. I think traditionally when you're buying media on TV, and Tony, I'm sure you had a ton of experience with this, you're looking more at like a channel, a time frame, or a show, and you assume that's where your audience is going to be. But on a platform like Mountain, when you build a campaign, it's going to feel more similar to building something on search or social. We recommend to really start with an audience first approach so you can leverage your learnings of what's already working on other channels and then apply it to the big screen. With these cost-effective creative execution arms, you can also make audience-specific creative without really breaking the bank. And understanding, what's performing, what's not performing, double downing on what's working and leaving behind what's not. This way we can move away from the misconception that, launching on CTV or on the living room quality inventory is going to need a TV style budget. Resources that we have to help you guys really get started and just like dip your toe in the water to start testing would be to partner with someone like a C Squared Social who really has that integrated media experience and can focus on delivering results and an entire media plan matching creative back to it. And then also at Mountain, we have Quick Frame by Mountain, which is an option for brands looking to execute video for CTV or any other creative assets within their mix that they need, with more of a marketplace approach, making it easy really to get videos for any style and any format at really any price. But we would recommend starting with a wider swing variable. Something you mentioned on the last slide, Tony, that I thought it reminded me of something that we did, was about like emotion or tone. We ran a study a couple of years ago about like a negative or a positive tone, like which would perform better. And especially in like the weight loss category, which is something that Mountain and C Squared do a lot together, we saw that like negative commercials performed a lot better than positive ones. But in other verticals, positive commercials performed better than negative ones. So it's all about really getting started and understanding what works for your brand, what resonates for your audience, and then starting that testing cycle. But you can't really start that cycle until you start. And that brings me to the creative rubric. Whether you're using C Squared or QuickFrame, however you're getting your creative executed, this is a rubric that we use internally to determine the strength of your creative assets. Between these 6 items, the 4 that really stand out to me are attention, branding, CTA, and sound. Really attention, 50% of the total impact to recall and awareness are going to occur in the first about 2 seconds of your asset. So you have to ask yourself, is your ad really catching anyone's attention in the first 2 seconds? If not, you need a stronger hook. When it comes to branding, are your logo and URL present throughout the entire video? As you have this entire marketing mix, you want to make sure that your other marketing efforts further down the funnel, there's some brand recall. So when someone might get that social ad, they think, oh, I saw that CTV ad last week and now I'm ready to buy. So it's all about making sure that all the efforts are hitting your customer. And then when it comes to the call to action, have you made it clear to your audience what they should do next? Is there a promotion, a discount code that could provide a sense of urgency? It's funny how many commercials are just like an overview of the brand, but they want performance. So you got to ask your customer to do whatever is the outcome you're looking for. Then when it comes to sound, it's really important to use audio. Just think about the time that like you're in the kitchen and the TV's on. How do you expect people to hear what you want them to do and hear about your brand if you're just going to play like elevator music in the back of your ad? It's really important to have strong sound cues, call to action, strong branding, and a strong hook to make sure that your creative is doing the best it can for your brand. And we actually we as in Tony and I partnered on an asset for C Squared that I think is really strong. And we're going to share it in the next slide.
Yeah, thank you, Madeline. I think, one thing that resonates with me on that last slide, obviously all very important components, right? But what we love at C Squared about working with Mountain and the platform is, we'll typically make 3 or 4 different offers or calls to action. And it's so easy just to plug and play those in to Mountain's platform and optimize them very, very quickly. So it's just like click and drag, very, very simple to use. All right, so we're sitting here and we're, preaching about how great CTV is. So let me kind of show you how at C Squared Social, we actually practice what we preach. So what we are about to show you is one of our own CTV campaigns that we run specific to generating new clients into our agency, into C Squared Social. And we run obviously on Mountain's platform. So we obviously try to use all of the best practices here, clear messaging, emotional support, all the things that Madeline said, strong call to action. And this isn't just something we recommend to clients. We believe in it so much that we're spending our own marketing dollars on CTV, driving new clients into the C Squared family, and it's actually working. So without further ado, why don't we go ahead and play the spot?
Trust the experts at C Squared Social for all your health and wellness marketing needs. Imagine your business reaching new heights with targeted advertising and captivating visuals that connect with your consumers. Whether you're in GLP-1s, medical devices, supplements, pharmaceuticals, or med spas, we drive success across the health and wellness industry. Our team crafts personalized strategies that deliver real results. Partner with C Squared Social and let's grow your business together. Visit C Squared Social today.
So as you can see, that video is specifically targeting any potential clients we think will be a good fit to work with us across the health and wellness space. And then the plan will be to have different creatives across different types of categories.
Yeah, and when it comes to optimizing your ads, that's a good example, Tony, of how like here's this one message that we want to get across, but we have different categories and verticals that we want to aim at. So that's a really good cost-effective way of saying like, here's the ad, and then we just want to like put another that said health.c squared on it. We want to put like beauty.c squared on it. And then we just want to change the voiceover. That's a way to not like reshoot every time and keep adding more creative dollars there, but instead do small tweaks. And that's a best practice overall when it comes to like make an initial creative asset that follows best practices, of course, and then don't stop there. Continuously tweak your creative based on a flywheel approach about what's working and what's not working. So number one thing there is, always have that performance marketing approach. Similarly to what your brands are likely doing on Meta, you're going to want to test and iterate on your ad creative throughout the entire campaign. Even if it's an evergreen campaign that's, up and running for, say, you have budget for 12 months, how can we make sure that we're changing the creative when it's like Q4 holiday or when it's Black Friday, and understand what's really driving performance. So this way you'll be able to optimize those future campaigns to save you time and money. Going back to that like negative and positive example, the next time that brand did a creative shoot that maybe was a larger investment, they knew, let's scrap the positive tone in the script, and moving forward, we're going to focus on negative for our performance marketing. That's what works. But that optimization was not a one and done deal. It's always going to be an ongoing process. As you launch campaigns, as you test new creative, you'll constantly be gathering more learnings to make more iterations. It doesn't always have to be that end card or the call to action, but it could be different talent, like I said, different tone, different emotion. This process is a cycle, which you're going to continuously integrate new learnings, bring in new variables to just fine tune the overall strategy of the brand. But instead of looking at it like in a vacuum and saying, this is our CTV strategy and this is what works on CTV, and you want to apply it across the rest of your brand to understand how can these learnings move across our entire brand and really infiltrate the brand messaging overall, the brand audience targeting overall, and just the learnings will help you apply to get smarter about your brand across the board.
Yeah, thanks, Madeline. I mean, as you mentioned, always be testing, right? Constantly testing new creative offers, seasonality, you name it. I think it's a very important factor that people miss because they think their spot is done, it's working, but then they'll start seeing diminishing returns after a month or two, and now they're not ready to have a new creative. So you really have to plan those things out. Okay, this is one of my favorite things about CTV, and it's called a halo effect, right? So let's take a little moment to talk about what that halo effect is of Mountain's platform and CTV as a whole, which again goes beyond just the immediate impact of the performance of CTV, which, by the way, it performs extremely well in silo by itself. For most of our clients, CTV is actually one of the best, if not the best performing channel in their media mix, but it also has a major assist on the other channels in the mix. So, I kind of think of it as it's a pitch and catch role, right? So if you look at respondents that come from CTV, they typically have a 49% longer session duration than paid social. So what does that mean? It means that users who engage with your brand after seeing a CTV ad spend significantly more time exploring your content compared to who's just here to see your paid social ads. It gives you a competitive advantage, right? Because you have a more engaged impression if you're in a highly competitive industry, such as the GLP-1s, for example, is highly competitive right now. And again, it's a big screen experience, bringing them and keeping them engaged. So really longer session times. And then CTV, it also delivers a 22% stronger conversion rate for paid search, right? So again, a pitch and catch role. So adding CTV to the mix makes your paid search campaigns work that much harder and perform that much better, right? I'm sure some people on the call have experienced it where you're just hitting a ceiling on paid search and you just cannot squeeze anything more out of that lemon. Well, you implement CTV and all of a sudden, the performance on paid search does get significantly better. So, in essence, more engaged users lead to higher intent, and ultimately that translates directly into conversions and ultimately revenue in the bank. I think I'll make one more point here, which is, it doesn't only just improve paid search, but it also has a higher impact on session duration in search. We talked about, session duration in paid, but it does have a 19% longer session duration in search as well, which then leads to, from a social perspective, another 9% increase in conversion rates across paid social. So it's helping engagement, it's helping conversion, right? And it's doing that both on Google and paid. So that's really what happens, and the impact and that halo effect that CTV has when you introduce it to the mix, especially when you're utilizing Meta and Google as the vast majority of your media mix, which most people we run into these days are.
And I think the session duration is such an interesting stat because it really talks about quality of leads. Like you can have someone like pop onto your site and yes, you're getting higher site traffic, but what about the people that are actually going to your site and staying there and looking around? Like that's a more qualified site traffic user to me than someone that, maybe by accidentally and landed on the site.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we showed you the creative that was running on Mountain CTV for C Squared. What I'd like to do now is show you a creative that we executed in less than a week that is actually performing, right? It's actually performing well across CTV. I think it was actually, I may have lied. It might have not been a week. It might have been a week and a half potentially. But for this client, CTV wasn't just a set it and forget it channel for them. It was really a core driver of performance. And we integrated it seamlessly into their paid search and social and email campaign efforts. And by the way, if you're not actively utilizing email within the funnel, although this slide has nothing to do with email, I would advise you to start integrating a good email strategy into the funnel as well, because CTV and email work very, very well together. So this was, to be clear, it was a post-production commercial, stock footage, existing footage. There was no shoot days or additional talent we had to go out and source. So that's why we could get it done very quickly, very efficiently, and very affordable. Because of our relationship with Mountain and the creative credits through QuickFrame and some of the ways that we work together, for the right client, we at C Squared are actually able to execute, creatives like this for free if it is for the right client and the right category. So point being, part in partnership with Mountain, we can really get clients up and tested on CTV quickly and efficiently, and typically within 2 weeks. So without further ado, why don't we show the spot?
Fitting weight loss into your busy schedule can be hard. Bell Medical makes it simple. We deliver compounded semaglutide directly to your door and handle the entire process virtually, from consultation to treatment. No more worrying about those time-consuming office visits. Instead, you get a straightforward way to work toward your goals. On average, our patients lose about 15% of their body weight without compromising their lifestyle. With Bell Medical, weight loss is finally within reach.
Cool. And as you can see, it touched on many of the elements that Madeline had referenced earlier about what makes a good creative. So let's take a look at probably our best case study as it relates to actual numbers and ROI. So this client launched their CTV strategy through C Squared using the Mountain platform. We're also doing Google, Meta, email. So the full spectrum of media channels and getting the right mix at the right channel at the right time. And, the results were just absolutely amazing, right? So if you look, we had a starting budget of just over $25,000, which initially generated $237,000 in revenue. So that return on ad spend was 9.5, close to a 10-1, which was just absolutely amazing. But as we scaled that, at one point, actually, we had 1 month where the return on ad spend was a 43-1, right? And then currently it's much more. I think this case study was created 3 or 4 months ago, but it's scalable as well, right? Sometimes you get into these channels and you go, okay, it's working now, but if I pour some jet fuel on it, is it going to continue to perform? And the answer is yes, it is very, very scalable, right? I think that spend increased and revenue got to almost $3 million with an average return on ad spend for that $3 million at 18. Well, yeah, 18. So you're looking at an 18-1 for this specific client, which was just absolutely exceptional. And obviously, as we've kind of beat the drum throughout this webinar, it also impacted their other channels, right? So you saw paid search in Google while the CTV spots were doing these types of just incredible numbers. We also saw the paid search in Google CPAs come down, which was great.
And something that's great to also share about this advertiser is the way that Mountain was integrated within their plan. A lot of people look at Mountain and CTV as a whole as like an upper funnel channel. And I know this dialogue is hopefully changing that for you guys, but they were running like prospecting campaigns. They were running retargeting campaigns. They were looking at their site traffic. I think we had excluded their CRM list. So like there's so much more we can do besides just like, here's an audience and here's a CTV commercial. But C Squared's way of like looking at Mountain and setting up the campaigns, especially for this client, was pretty exceptional, which allowed them to hit these types of goals and metrics. Cool. So for today's key takeaways, I covered a lot today, but if you don't take anything away from today's webinar, a couple things we would love for you to remember is 1, CTV is essential to every performance marketer's media mix, especially because of the growing audiences on the platform. Like I said in the first slide, the more eyeballs, the more opportunity. There's more people than ever looking at their living room televisions, more than what's on Meta. And it's easier and more affordable for marketers to really make CTV creative. Thanks to our partners at C Squared, thanks to Quick Frame by Mountain, we can get things up and running for you, as Tony said, in under 2 weeks, just so you can test out the platform.
Yep. Thanks, Madeline. I'll take these next 2 here, but also it's crucial to follow, as we talked about, best practices for creative, whether that's strong messaging, pulling that emotional trigger and that emotional appeal, or obviously having a clear call to action that brings that rational element of it. I hit the emotional trigger. A rational trigger can be, is the price point right? Will I get my shipping on time? So on and so forth. So it's really important to hit those key features, but also the work doesn't stop once the ad is live, right? You need to constantly be testing, iterating, and optimizing your creative. And it's just a never-ending cycle. Finally, but certainly not least, right? When CTV is added to your overall media mix and to your overall performance marketing strategy, it doesn't just perform well on its own, right? It amplifies the performance across all of the other channels and provides that halo effect that boosts engagement, longer session durations, as we discussed, which leads to higher conversion rates across the board. So yeah, I mean, if you really want to maximize the impact of your entire media strategy, I think adding CTV really is a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer.
Thank you so much, Tony and Madeline, for this really insightful dialogue about creative best practices for CTV and really kind of beyond just creative, but more, campaign strategy and ideas for how people can really start to think about approaching producing CTV creative. So I hope folks at home have a lot of food for thought on how they can start to bring that into their own organization. Now, it does look like we have some audience questions, so let's just jump right in. So should I be thinking about the videos I develop for social differently than I do for CTV, or can I use the same assets in both spaces?
I can take that. I think in short or in long, the answer is it depends. You want to look obviously at that creative rubric that we went over. But I think that if you are putting creative budget towards social ads and you don't have the funds to, do a full net new production for CTV, there's post-production tweaks to make sure that it's going to be like in a 16:9 frame, that you have a good hook and that you're following that creative rubric we went over. So I think the answer is, again, it depends what you're putting on social, but there's always a way in post-production to make sure that you're not investing too much money to try a new channel. Again, like we want to make sure that the barrier to entry isn't overwhelming to any marketer. And there's always things that we can do on the back end to make a library of footage that you already have doable for a new platform.
Great. All right. So we have another question from the audience, and Tony, this one is for you, but Madeline, I think you'll have some good insights here as well. So you mentioned in that case study that you had a budget of approximately 25K for that campaign, and someone wants to know, did that include creative costs? And then we have a couple follow-up questions there, but we'll start there. Is that an all-inclusive price? Or yeah.
That's an excellent question. So, and I think I weaved it into, the webinar when I was discussing getting creative up and running. So we look at the right category, the right client. We have some predictive models to say, hey, do we feel like this client is going to do well across connected television and their media mix as a whole once you implement connected TV? For this client, we did. Right. So we included the creative. It was a 30-second and a 15-second cut down creative, just at basically our cost. And the 25,000 was actually what went to media. So none of that budget was creative. With that said, we do have some clients that say, hey, we want to go shoot on this river for 3 days and do a whole different type of, so now you're shipping equipment and everything else. That's obviously a different cost. But for this client, it was very similar to the C² spot that you saw and the Bell Medical spot that you saw.
And sort of a kind of a follow-up question for that, kind of keeping going back into this idea of creating that ad within a week to a week and a half. Just sort of thinking about the sort of behind the scenes of that. You mentioned that those clips weren't, net new footage that y'all were taking, but were those, maybe social assets that were used in the past? Were they just repurposed stock footage? Just kind of more curious about how that came together so quickly.
Great question. Yeah. A combination of existing assets in addition to stock footage that we pulled in. And then we do a lot of the 3D rendering ourselves in-house, which we found has had a really great impact on results. It's just a tiny bit more of credibility, right? You see the spinning vial and 3D. So it's just a lot of in-house designers, production, post-production, and mostly existing assets from social, and then stock footage that we bring to the table.
And one sort of last question on this, and this kind of piggybacks off of what you mentioned, Madeline, how sound is so important. How did you go about sourcing that voiceover?
Yeah, so we actually have a whole host of different voiceover talents that we use. We try not to use the same talent twice, but they're very talented, so they can change their voice a little bit based on what we ask them to. So yeah, we basically, put scripts out to the voiceover talent that we are typically used to working with. and they send a reading back, and then, we work with the client to select the one that we feel is the best fit.
Yeah, and just from
Awesome.
experience on the Quick Frame team, that's pretty closely to how we would do it on their end too. Basically, once you lock in a script, you have a bunch of people read it, the client approves whichever one they want in their ad.
Great. All right. So Madeline, I think this one actually is going to be perfect for you. So the question is, can I set up a true A/B test with CTV the way I can with my other performance channels?
Yes, in short. So basically you will be able to drag and drop your creative assets into your library on the Mountain platform, and then you can weight them differently depending on how you want to start the weight off. Could be 50-50, and then you can lower down the weight of the one that's not performing better, and then you can again keep testing.
Yeah, and I think that is just amazing. I mean, I'm dating myself a little here, but again, even as late as 2012, 2014, when CTV and OTT was on the rise and linear TV was still dominating at that time, but obviously now there's been a significant switch. You would have to traffic the two different creatives. You'd have to run one creative one week, one creative the next week, right, on the same exact networks, and figure out which one was working better. It was not an exact science. And the fact that we can just click and drag creatives, assign the budgets to them, assign the demos to them, and just let it go saves us a lot of time and a lot of money.
All right. So I think we have time for one or two more questions. So Madeline, I think this one would be perfect for you to answer. What's an appropriate budget to allocate towards creative?
It totally depends. I think that you could get away with, if like a $2,000 post-production project, probably, maybe even 1,500, or you can spend $300,000 on a broadcast TV commercial. So I think it really depends at what level of investment you're comfortable with. I would say that most brands want to start with like a post-production piece just to get on the platform and see some return. And then as it becomes more tried and true, they start investing more and more into their creative assets. Something I think that has always been interesting when I was working in the creative world, and I'm sure Tony's team does this too, is that even when you're, referencing that $300,000 TV commercial set, you want to make sure to capture footage for other platforms as well. And the days are gone of doing a big shoot like that and walking away with one asset, but instead they're going to include, a whole performance marketing, testing schedule and all the platforms. So I think it really depends. Like you can start at something that's more post-production focused and more affordable. And then as you are really entrenched in your full integrated media strategy, you can look at bigger shoots to capture content for all channels that follow a specific performance testing framework.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. I think we have time for one last question. So, we talk about ad fatigue. We talk about all of these creatives that we're making for CTV. But obviously, you can't just have one ad for 5 years and consider that to be great performance. So, how frequently should a brand, typically, generally be swapping in new creative to their campaigns?
Another great question. Wow, these are great questions. Again, it depends, right? There's a lot of factors that go into creative fatigue and when you should be planning out your next creative to test and launch. Factors include, what is the competitive environment like? Are you the only one out there selling your product or service? Or is it a highly crowded space? Right? So there's a lot of media frequency across the same product and service and potentially the same messaging. Like anything else, right? You're walking down the street, you have the same shoes for 5 months, the soles are going to get worn out, right? It's the same with creative. The more you are running it and getting that message across, you will hit some diminishing returns, at which point you need to start thinking about generating creative. Now, what we do at C Squared is we have really sophisticated creative fatigue models, where we're analyzing sometimes daily, sometimes weekly, what are we seeing from a creative fatigue standpoint, and when do we need new creative? That does not include the obvious times where you need new creative. Let's say it's Black Friday, the holidays, New Year, New You in January. Those types of seasonality components will always create a necessity for new creative. But the best way to figure out if your creative needs updating is to just run it through a creative fatigue model, which has lots of different components, media spend, competitive set, and a whole host of other components that data scientists way smarter than me can tell you about.
There's nothing worse than when you're watching TV and you get the same ad for days and days and days.
Right.
So we want to make sure we're refreshing the creative when it's appropriate.
Well, thank you again, Tony and Madeline, and thank you all at home for joining us for this Mountain Forum. Now, if you were so glued to your screen that you didn't take as many notes as you would have liked, don't worry. That's what the post-show email was invented for, and you will all receive one with an on-demand recording of this session in the near future. Now, if you'd like to know what webinars and events we have coming up next, or when you would like to watch past presentations, visit mountain.com/webinars. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you at the next forum.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.